So, everybody's ready. So, sometimes I forget to thank Harry for, every meeting, except he's up in Florida, that he comes and he does the taping here, and the tapes are sent to the museum and so forth. As I say in the Gazette every week, every month, they're there for posterity, and for the future generations to have a snapshot of what Hamilton was like way back then. So it's my pleasure tonight to introduce our speaker. He is my friend, my neighbor, and a colleague. I work with Paul at the Hampton Water Quality Commission, and so I can attest to personally that the esteem he has held, within his colleagues, and his tireless ambition. He's innovative, he's dedicated, and he's our leader, and he has been right from the very beginning. So besides being part owner of one of the largest blueberry farms in the world, and I'll just have to read a little bit of his resume, is that he is involved in local, county, and state advisory commissions. And so he is in the Atlantic County Parks and Environmental Advisory Commission, the North American Blueberry Council, the U.S. Highbush Blueberry Council, the Hamilton Parks and Recreation Committee, the Hamilton Environmental Commission, and many more. And I know too that he is involved also, that his experience and his dedication leads him to soccer with his, for the community. So we're pleased to have Paul here tonight because, this job of the Pinelands Commission is a big job. I don't know how Ray finds all his time, but it's an important position, prestigious position, and it's something that affects all of us. So with that, I'll introduce Paul.
Thank you, Bill. That was very kind. I don't know if it was all true, but okay. Get this back. Good evening, everybody. My name is Paul Galletta. At the end of the meeting, please call me Paul if there's any questions during the meeting or at the end. I'm Paul to everybody here. I want to thank the Historical Society for inviting me to speak tonight. I was born, raised, and lived my whole life in Hamilton. There was a great article, and not just because Steve's here tonight, in the Gazette a few weeks ago about people that were born in Hamilton, raised their whole life, and they gave their stories. Well, I was born in the Esposito home. How many people were born in Hamilton, born and raised? Well, Hamilton is 100% Pinelands area. Not a lot of towns can say that. They're usually 50%, 40%, or even 75% or 10%. But our land mass is 100% in the Pinelands. And I feel those that were born here, raised, lived their whole life are authentic Pineys. There's a lot of people throughout the state that tell us what to do with our land, how to farm it, how to be good stewards of it. But we were here from the beginning, and I believe we're the true Pineys. The personal background, I think Bill summed it up, but just to talk a little bit about the farm, we do grow blueberries on 1,600 acres just outside of Hamilton, in Hamilton Township. I began serving on the Pinelands in 2007 as the Atlantic County representative. Today I'm the vice chair. I'll briefly describe tonight the Pinelands and how the Pinelands Commission protects the region. Then I'll highlight the region's history and some of its unique cultural resources. Okay, so what is the National Reserve? It's our first national reserve. In 1978, the National Parks and Recreation designated our area in South Jersey as the first national reserve. It covers 1.1 million acres and includes part of 56 towns in Atlantic, Burlington, Camden, Cape May, Cumberland, Gloucester, and Ocean counties. Pinelands is a truly special place. It's the largest body of open space between Boston and Richmond. The Pinelands is home to vast forests, expansive farmland, an environment that supports 850 species and nearly 500 animal species. We have wild orchids, rattlesnakes, and rare pine barrens tree frogs. The Pinelands is also home to an aquifer that contains an estimated 17 trillion gallons of pure water. That's the Kirkwood Cohansey. That could cover our whole state 10 feet high. And it could supply the United States for 1 year, half the population. That's how serious that aquifer is. The water resources in the Pinelands are so abundant and so attractive that speculators and entrepreneurs have been hard at work trying to devise ways of exploiting them for hundreds of years. The industrialist Joseph Wharton, that's the namesake of the Wharton Tract, brought nearly 110,000 acres of pine barren real estate in the late 19th century with the intention of establishing a mass damming program and cornering the market on fresh water supply to Philadelphia. His plan was thwarted, and when the New Jersey state legislators got wind of it and pushed through measures to ban the export of New Jersey water from the state. The federal and state government recognized the need to safeguard these resources, so they passed legislation in the late 1970s. The Federal Act established the Pineland National Reserve in 1978. The State Pinelands Protection Act created the Pinelands Commission in 1979 and called on it to create and carry out the Comprehensive Management Plan, which was adopted and signed into law in 1981. Does anybody know what the CMP is in this audience? It's kind of our Bible, it's our code. It tells what we could do on what land, how many houses you could build on density, compatible industries. Some areas are protected more than others. I'll get into it a little bit more, but I'd like to go over this timeline. I'll leave this out at the end of the meeting, and you can see some interesting timelines. This goes back, I think, 170, 200 million years ago. It starts way back. But the modern history, I would say some of the most important things is in 1963 we had a wildfire that burned, I think it was 185 homes and 190,000 acres in 1963. Shortly after, shortly after in '64 they put a Pinelands Regional Planning Board. This is very early in the stages. They didn't have much power or jurisdiction. And then in 1967, John McPhee's book. Did anybody ever hear of that?
The Pine Barrens, yes.
That was when they got wind that there was going to be a jet port and 250,000 people in the middle near Burlington County. And it was, they had a lot of ancillary plans to expand, and there was a public outcry in conservationists and environmentalists. Well, at the time, John McPhee played tennis with Brendan Byrne, and he got his ear. This is before he became governor. And they started talking, and he said, when I get into politics, I'm going to figure out a way to protect this land. But that was the genesis of Brendan Byrne. His buddy, John McPhee, who wrote the book, was tennis partners. In 1978, like I said, the National Parks and Recreation Act established the Pineland National Reserve. It called for a Pinelands Comprehensive Management Plan. In 1979, Governor Byrne had the Pinelands Commission formed. In 1980, they adopted two parts of the CMP. One was the preservation. In the Pinelands, you're either in the preservation zone or the protection zone. Here in Hamilton and Egg Harbor Township, we're all in the protection zone, which is a little bit less severe on the protection of the preservation. Preservation is towards right before Fort Dix, near the Wharton Track, all the state forest, and part of the cranberry bogs. their special ag protection. Then in 1980, we adopted the management plan on the protection side. In 1981, Governor Burns signed it. In 1981, the U.S. Secretary of the Interior signed it and became official. That's where we are today. That was the timeline on how the Pinelands came to be. Okay. As I noted earlier, I serve as Atlantic County's representative on the Pinelands Commission Board of Directors. The 15-member board consists of 7 members who are appointed by the New Jersey governor, 1 member appointed by each of the 7 Pineland counties, and 1 member appointed by the U.S. Secretary of the Interior. Just a brief note, every gubernatorial candidate gets nominated by the governor, gets senatorial courtesy from that fellow. He has to live in New Jersey on the gubernatorial side. He gets senatorial courtesy from the county that he's from, and then it goes before the Senate for confirmation. On the county, we get appointed by the executive, or some counties have administrators instead of executives. I still need the senator's courtesy in that county, and then it goes before the freeholders for the vote. The U.S. Interior designates 1 person, and that's why the Pinelands were originally the Pineland National Reserve. The federal government has a stake in this. So they always have 1 person who does not live, he doesn't have to live in New Jersey. The county appointments have to reside from their county. And by the way, if there's questions, you can stop me at any time. I could do a Q&A at the end, but it might be less formal if you just ask me on each slide.
Paul,
Yes.
how did you get involved to begin with?
I was asked.
Okay.
Our former Atlantic County rep was Ed Willerman, and Ed Willerman was busy, and he asked for a replacement after serving for, I think, 7 or 8 years. And we liked it, the board should be represented by farmers. At one point, we had Tomasello, Stephen Lee, and myself, which has given the farmers plenty of representation on that board, which they should have. That was mandated by the Pinelands Protection Act, to have farmer representation on that board. Right now, I'm the only farmer on that board. So I'm hanging on by a thread. I don't have much support. But I was asked by Ed Willerman. And before Ed, now that we're talking about it, my cousin Danny, in the late, I think it was 1998, served on the Pinelands Commission too. So we have 3 from Hamilton that served on that board. All board members are unpaid volunteers. The full board and its committees meet a couple times a month and receive guidance from the executive director and the commission staff. The commission's executive director heads a staff of 44 environmental reviewers, planners, scientists, educators, and others. The commission reviews applications for public and private development in the Pinelands area to ensure compliance with the comprehensive management plan. Aside from the rules that protect wetlands and other natural resources, the CMP established 9 land use management areas with varying goals, objectives, development intensities, and permitted uses. The goals, objective, and permitted uses in these management areas are implemented through local zoning. So every town has to codify their master plan with us. And they have to codify it based on this map. This is the 9 management areas that we give every town. They have the map, and then they make their master plan. Sometimes they ask for tweaks or waivers on certain areas, and there's maybe moving a little bit of land, mitigating a certain forest area to another, but this is pretty much set in stone. So this green area, this is the heart of the Pinelands. It's the biggest area. It's called the preservation area. And like I said, that's south of Fort Dix, and it has all the state forest. And the center is mostly the cranberry bogs, the Hayneses, the Lees. That's special ag production. And it's very much like the preservation area, and it's in the preservation area, but there's some cultural housing for the cranberry farmers that are allowed. A couple other things that when the Pinelands Comprehensive Management Plan was enacted, the cranberry farmers were asking for. So they had to make another special ag production area. That was another area inside the preservation. Then we have the brown area, and that's ag production. That's pretty much what most of the Hamilton growers are in. That's brown. That's all, the Hamilton's right here. It's surrounded by the brown. Purple is the town management, but we'll talk about that later. And there's a couple other little areas that are brown, and that's ag production. That's more upland than wetland farming. Then we go to rural development, which is yellow. That's sort of a transition between strict environmental rules and the rural development of forest and preservation. Sort of a transition zone. You could build homes at a, I think the rate is up to two homes per acre if you cluster, but it's sort of a transition zone. The Pinelands towns, there's 7 of them. Hamilton's one, Egg Harbor City's one, Woodbine, Whiting, and don't confuse, when we say town, it's not a form of government, it's a management plan. Hamilton's a real town, that's the form of government we have as a town. Egg Harbor City is a city, but in our management plan, it's a town. A town can be sewered, it can have up to 4 homes per acre on density, and it could be very much like a regional growth, which we'll go to next. Stop me if you have questions, too. Then we go to military. We have NAFAC and Fort Dix area. They needed special provisions if there was special needs, what's the word I'm looking for? When you have national security and they don't quite meet the strict environmental standards, they almost have a trump card where they could do it because these areas were important. I think Fort Dix was from right before World War I, if I'm not mistaken. That's when it was established.
Camp Dix. Yeah.
Camp Dix. Then we have the Pineland villages, like the Elwoods. There's quite a bit of them. They're very much like towns, but they're not sewered. So their individual septics and the densities are going to be lower. They're going to need at least an acre lot or a 3.2 acre lot. And then we finally, I talked about the special ag production, but that's pretty much the management areas. Any questions? Okay. It's important to note that the Pinelands Commission handles the permitting in the 938,000 acre Pinelands area, which includes Hamilton and 52 other towns. Meanwhile, the NJDEP handles the permitting in the crosshatched area of the Pineland National Reserve. The NJDEP already had oversight of that region under the Pre-Existing Coastal Area Facility Review Act, CAFRA. So it coordinates the Pinelands rules and the management areas on the coastal rules in these areas. So this whole colored map is the PNR. This crosshair, this crosshair is actually, the DEP is responsible for keeping the rules, just like whatever that color is, that's the management area. They have to abide by the CMP. This happened back in the 70s. The casino was coming in, and there was a lot of political push-pull. I don't know if you remember in the middle 70s, but the casino came in, and we thought, the Pinelands thought that they should cover the whole area. It would have been easy just to have them under one control instead of having crosshatched. The crosshatches, this is almost the east of the parkway going north is the CAFRA, and then west of the parkway going south is the CAFRA. But we thought it would be easy if we just had the whole jurisdiction, but there was a lot of push-pull, and the NJDEP already said they were doing it, they wanted to do it. Does anybody know what this is? This is not part of the PNR or the Pinelands area. Persky's thumb and forefinger. Did anybody ever hear of that? Okay, this was famous back then. And I believe before he was Senator Persky, they knew the casino was coming. And ironically, Brendan Byrne, his greatest achievement was passing the Casino Act. So they needed some expansion and some autonomous zoning where they wouldn't get involved. So Atlantic City needed a little bit of space. And that became Persky's thumb and his forefinger. And they kept that preservation real tight to it because they were afraid of movement and development pressure from the casinos.
So, what are the ramifications of that today?
Well, that's still, the township has complete rules, and they could still govern it by their rules, where they're not under DEP or Pinelands. They needed their own rules to build out that area. But wherever you see a colored portion, that falls under the management, and either the Pinelands or the DEP has to cover it. Does anybody know what that is? Weymouth Furnace. The cousins and the locals call it the Iron Bridge. So, the Pinelands Comprehensive Management Plan does not only protect the region's ecology, it also preserves the region's cultural resources. On this slide, you see the ruins of one of the original Weymouth Furnace structures. I ride by this site every day to work. Weymouth Furnace is not only a wonderful example of one of the important indigenous industries that took root here in the Pinelands, iron production, but also one of the industrial repurposing that characterized many sites when demand for the original product diminished or disappeared altogether. Weymouth's history begins in 1801, when a consortium purchased what was called the Great Egg Harbor Track. A furnace was built on the track along with sawmills, grist mills, and worker housing, and the furnace supported a small town around it until the demand for bog iron was very nearly dead in the 1860s. At this time, a paper mill was built on site and ran successfully until the diminishment of that market in the 1890s. I showed you the timeline before, but we did put a real good timeline that I invite you to look at later. Going back on the early side, the first human inhabitants appeared in the Pinelands at around 10,000 BC, faced with considerably different environmental conditions than the ones present today. Groups were very highly mobile and relied on the hunting of now extinct species such as mammoth and mastodon. Hurried glacial conditions prevailed and the weather was cold and dry, with open grasslands and subarctic terrain dominating. This terrain included large wind-generated depressions called sponge, many of which are still visible today at various locations within the Pinelands, now often filled with water. As the environment slowly approached that of the present day, changes in plant and animal species led to corresponding changes in Native American culture, technology, and demography. Over time, groups began to utilize pottery and stayed with smaller ranges, tending to small gardens and eventually becoming more reliant on agricultural and seasonal crops to supplement traditional hunting grounds. By the time that Europeans arrived here, the cultural group that self-identified as the Lenape spoke two distinct dialects in the region that was soon to become known as New Jersey. In the north, above the Raritan River, the Lenape spoke the Muncie dialect. In the area that would become known as the Pinelands, they spoke the Yanami dialect. These dialects were derived from the Algonquin language family, which linguists believe has